Hi everybody. In this video we are going to create a drum beat with swing rhythms by using an array to subdivide the beat into a triple meter feel. There is a lot going on in that aim. So I want to start off by saying I started thinking about this topic in that someone on the Sonic Pi in-thread forum posted something about trying to recreate the New York State of Mind beat, which is a beat off Nas's Illmatic album that was produced by the great DJ Premier. So the post was by Rogue Entropy, shout outs to Rogue Entropy, and posted some code. They were more trying to replicate sort of the beeping from that track, which you'll hear in a moment. But what I zeroed in more on was the code for the drum beat, which seemed to be missing a bit of the signature bounce of that drum beat. So I have here just a sort of cut up sample of that, and hopefully this will not trip any copyright monitoring on YouTube. But this is what the beginning of the beat and the drum beat sounds like. So that is the drum beat of the actual beat. Now here is the code that Rogue Entropy used for their specific beat. Now it feels like the tempo may be a little faster there. And notice that in this code they're using the array method for programming drums, which I have made a tutorial about, which you can check out if you're not quite sure what's going on with this code here. But the other thing to take note of is that the drums don't have that same kind of bounce that the original version has. These are much more kind of straightforward and even, whereas the drum beat in the original version sort of is a bit more laid back and bouncy, for lack of better words to kind of describe that. And what's going on there is it's utilizing a bit more of what we would call a swing rhythm. Now, swing is kind of a difficult term to pin down. In one definition, swing, regards to like jazz or other types of music, swing is really a feel. So if you talk about swing rhythms, you're talking about kind of the feel of the rhythms. And as Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And that is a much more kind of abstract concept that certainly cannot be broken down and recreated using code. So in one sense, this idea of swing, I would argue, is not even something we could replicate through code in Sonic Pi or elsewhere. But we are going to break down the concept of swing in a bit more of technical terms, as opposed to sort of the abstract version of that. And by doing so, should be able to then try and recreate this drum beat a bit more accurately, and then also give us the ability to maybe add that sort of feel or effect into other types of music that we want to make in Sonic Pi. So the thing about swing, if we kind of step away from swing and just sort of look at the idea of rhythm for a second, and I am going to just comment this out and kind of push it out of the way here. All right, so I will be kind of continuing to use this array method of rhythm here later on. So let me make a live loop. Let's call it swing. And I'm just going to use a sample of a hi-hat, one of these new hi-hat sounds in Sonic Pi 4.5, and then we will sleep for 0.5. So that is, let me make sure volume is good here. So this is giving us this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So this is a very even feel. This is definitely not what we would categorize as a swing rhythm. It's just very even. We are subdividing the beat into two parts, the downbeat and the upbeat. We could say we are subdividing it into eighth notes. So I have a little graphic here that we can take a look at. So on the top, this would be just the musical notation subdividing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that is something we could refer to as duple meter. Now, what in order to do swing, swing is sort of this kind of long, short feel in which the first part of the beat, the downbeat, is felt. And then instead of there being an even distance between the downbeat and the upbeat, the one and the and, or the two and the and, which are very even when we talk about duple meter, in fact, in swing, we're kind of displacing the upbeat, so it happens a little later than we would expect. So the downbeat on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 happens in the right spot, but then the upbeat, the and, happens a little later than maybe we are expecting if they were to be even, and that kind of helps to propel the music forward and give it a bit more of kind of a push with that. So I'll come back to this, but I'm going to use a website called Groove Pizza, and this is an app or website developed by NYU, the New York University Music Experience Lab, along with someone there named Ethan Hind, who is a professor at multiple universities in the New York area and does a lot of blog posts and writing about different musical topics. So this is sort of conceptualizing rhythm in a circular form but also we have this grid form here. So what I'm going to do is take apart, and there's these different sort of things we can select. I'm going to take the BPM down to maybe about 100, which is where my code is at the moment. Then we have these slices, which we could conceptualize as sort of subdivisions. So I'm just going to, for the sake of this, fill in all of these, and then we get this. Okay, and this we could even think seems more subdivided into 16th notes. So I'm going to take it down to 8 slices here, which kind of gets us back into that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. And I'm going to slow it down a little bit just for the sake of this. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay. So if we look at this graphic here, this grid, we see the distance between each green dot seems to be equal. So the reason I am using this website is because it has this little selector here in marked swing, and this gives us a real good visual understanding about what is actually happening when we talk about swing. So I want you to keep your eyes on these or even numbers, which would be the upbeats. So as I move the swing up, you'll see that those dots start to get displaced and kind of pushed further and further to the right, which increases the space between this downbeat and this upbeat. And we can also look at it here. You see 1, and then there's a long gap to the 2, but then a shorter gap to the 3 and a longer gap to the 4. So the concept of swing, at least in technical terms, is that we are sort of displacing the upbeat to create sort of a long, short, long, short. Now, I am not going to push it all the way to 50 for the sake of what we're doing here. I'm going to cut it down to 33 to kind of get it to the more sort of traditional sound that we get. And I'm assuming these numbers have some meaning in terms of how far apart they are. So now if we listen to this sound, so we get this, we still have like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, but it's sort of become this long, short, long, short, long, short. We are sort of exaggerating the space between the downbeat and the upbeat, which gives it a bit more of that bouncy feel that I was talking about before. And we can get a nice visual of this in Groove Pizza. So to go into Sonic Pi for a minute and try and recreate that, essentially what we have, and we can kind of, we want to think about this as like a downbeat and an upbeat, right? We could consider this the downbeat, and now this has the upbeat, and then we run it. We have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so what you hear is increase this time and into have this sleep for a little longer and this sleep for a little shorter. And I'm basically breaking this down into thirds here. So I recreate this. If we listen, we get that same long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. And so now that's basically recreated that swing rhythm that we had going on here in Groove Pizza. So if we want to break this down musically, to go back to this graphic, so the way we are conceptualizing this is instead of just even 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, which in Sonic Pi we did by just having 0.5 and 0.5, now we have this taking up like 2/3 of the whole beat and this taking up 1/3 of the whole beat. And so in music, the way we can kind of conceptualize that is breaking the beat down instead of into two parts, duple meter, we are actually breaking the beat down into 3 subdivided parts, which we would refer to as triple meter. Now, in a 4/4 time signature, to do that, I'd need to create something called a triplet. So a triplet is the idea of breaking down into pieces of 3 as opposed to pieces of 2. So here, instead of in the space of 2 beats where I would have 1 and, here I have 3 spaces now where I can fit sound. So here, instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and we'd feel more like triplet, 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 triplet. So that is how we can kind of conceptualize of what we are doing with this swing. And to put it a different way, in terms of feel, if we, instead of going a 4/4 time signature, we would switch to a 12/8 time signature. Here, the 8th note gets a beat, and there would be 12 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But for the feel, we would break that down into kind of a pulse of 4, and each pulse would get 3 beats. So it gives it that triplet feel where we're kind of, instead of feeling things in 2s, we're feeling things in 3s. All right, so I'm gonna go and now, so we've recreated this first in just sort of simple mathematics here, okay? And another way we could do it is, instead of doing that, we could do maybe fractions here, which would possibly get it a little, like a little more accurate. I mean, we're talking like, several decimal places, but this is the idea of sort of 2/3 of the beat and then 1/3 of the beat. So if I want to go, let's now kind of look at this in more of the array form here. So I'm going to create a duple array here. And this is meant to represent beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4 with the downbeat and the upbeat. So to do that in my code here, get rid of this, sleep for 0.5. I am going to do duple.length times do. I'm going to make a counter, this is I, and I'll get rid of this, and then I'm going to create a conditional. So if duple I is equal to 1, it's going to play this sound. And again, this is something that I covered in a separate tutorial about using arrays to make sort of grid style drum beats, which would be similar to kind of what we got going on here in Groove Pizza or several other kind of drum beat making websites or any digital audio workspace like a piano roll or something like that. So I run this, we have I need an end here so I have a do here for my live loop, but now I have a do here, so I need to end that. So here we've kind of recreated that same sound, that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So now what I'm going to do is make another array called triple, and this time, instead of 2 1s for each beat, I'm going to do 3 1s. So 1, 2, 3, that's beat 1, 1, 2, 3, that's beat 2, 1, 2, 3, that's beat 3, 1, 2, 3, that's beat 4. All right, so again, I've broken this down, beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. And so now I'm going to change this to triple, and if triple I, so it's just basically what this counter is doing is for the number of values I have in this array, this I is just sort of creating a counter and iterating through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through the length of that. And this is checking to see that at that point, if the point we are at in the array is equal to 1, then it's going to play the sound. And at this point, it's going to always play. Now, I'm going to change my sleep value here to be a third of a beat as opposed to half of the beat. So you can kind of wrap your head and you have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, triplet, 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 right? So sort of still feeling a kind of pulse of 4, but on top of that, we have this triplet feel going on. So what basically happens here with a swing rhythm is that we are playing the first and third beat, or not beat, but first and third note within that beat. So this is subdivided into 3 parts, part 1, part 2, part 3. We're playing on beat 1 and beat 3, and we are not playing on beat 2. So you can then imagine from here, we skip this, so the time that this plays lasts for 2/3, and then we play for 1/3 there. So that will give us that long, short, long. So I'm gonna go here. So this is beat 1. I'm putting a 0 there, which means we won't play. Put a 0 here. That beat, we don't play on the second part. Here, same thing, don't play on the second part. And then here, same thing, don't play on the second part. So now this is going to give us that long, short, long, short, long, short, long kind of feel as well. Long, short, long, short, long, short, long. All right. So now using that method, we can start to add, like, we could not just apply this to hi-hats, but we could apply this to kick drums and snare drums and things like that. So now what I could do is going back to kind of this grid here. I can recreate, and I think even I have a little cheat code here that I'm going to steal just to make my life a little easier. So I'm going to comment this out. So now what I have here, and just to kind of compare to this grid, which I'll move up. Right, so this is the grid that was the original beat that Rogue Entropy had made, which is the drum beat to New York State of Mind. But now what I've done is instead I've broken this down, and I've kind of put this into 6s, so I could just as easily maybe break this into sections of 3, kind of give it that. But now we are conceptualizing each beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In terms of each beat now has 3 parts instead of 2 parts. Or in this case, they actually broke it down into 4 parts, which would be 16th notes. But that's still this idea of duple meter, in which everything's broken down in and divisible by 2 as opposed to parts of 3. So I go down here and kind of take this code again from what Rogue Entropy did. I'm just going to make some slight adjustments to this code. I'm going to get rid of this puts for here. They used index instead of I, but the counter is still the same thing. They called this grid 1, so I'm just going to change this to grid 1 as well. And so then we have this. So we have, in this case, a kick drum, which is going to play, and I'm going to get rid of, well, I'll leave it, I guess, the release and some other parameters here. But the idea is if grid 1, as we loop through the index, and they have 32, I'm going to do grid 1 dot length dot times do, just so it will conform to however many objects or values I have in this array, is going to iterate through. Anytime it comes across a 1, it is going to play this kick drum, and anytime it comes across a 2, it's going to play the snare drum. And so here we can now kind of recreate this bouncy feel that we have by where we put the kick drums, which are 1s, and the snare drums, which are 2s, which won't be quite as sort of rigid or as the original drum beat was. And again, I'm going to change the value of the sleep to a 3rd to accommodate for the triple feel. So let's see what we get here. Now, certainly a little slower here, so there's a couple ways I could play around with that. I could change the BPM. I could also break this into 0.6. But I think I'm going to keep it at 1/3, and I'm just going to maybe bump this up to like 130. But if you hear it, so we get that kind of sort of long, short, that sort of stutter kick drum sound that gives it a bit more bounce there. Now, one more thing I could add to this is I could go back to a hat sound. And this, I wouldn't, if I just leave it like this, it's going to give me that triplet feel, which does give you a better sense of kind of the breakdown of the 4 there. 1, 2, 3. Okay, but if I want it to play just on like every sort of beat as opposed to all 3 parts of each beat, I could just do if, and then I could do index mod 3 equals 0. So this would be basically every 3rd beat is going to play the hi-hat. And so then I would get so there you have it. Basically now, so the idea is we've broken the beat into 3 parts, subdivided into 3 parts, as opposed to 2 parts. And through that, we're able to create this sort of more bouncy feel. And you notice a lot of the kick drums either happen on the first part of the beat or the last part of the beat to give it that sort of bouncier kind of sound. And the 2s are pretty much straightforward on like the downbeats of 2 and 4, like a regular backbeat would be. But the idea is more we sort of get this bouncy feel with the drums by using either the downbeat on the first or the 3rd part of the beat, which gives us that long, short, long kind of swung feel that we get. And just to kind of go back to the original, and then I can come back to my code here, maybe bump it up a little bit. And so that gives us that sort of bouncy swing rhythm that we want to get that kind of drum beat feel, as opposed to a bit more straightforward with that grid. And I guess just to kind of really drive the point home, I'll alternate between the original, which was this, in which we are subdividing into duple meter, which I'll do as 0.25. Just comment that out. So this was the original. Maybe I'll make this 5 just to... Oh, I'm messing this up. Sorry. So the hi-hat as well, I can just comment that out. So the hi-hat right now is playing on every 3rd, which we don't want in this case. So we get this. Or I could mod this. So this one's a lot more even. And then we go back to our triple feel grid. I'll just make some quick mods here. We got this. we can definitely get that feel, that difference of the bounce. So that is maybe a long-winded kind of breakdown of how we can make drum beats using that swing rhythm to give it a bit more bounce, and using some arrays to do that. So hopefully you're able to incorporate that into your own code and your own beats to make give it that different feel if that's what you're looking for.